Good morning, calendar week 24. What is a happy doomer anyway? My first real attempt at committing an explanation to the world. Happy doomerism is the joy of being alive in a world which used to be easier. It is Zen thinking, not as consolation or from gratitude, but because the universe is infinite and I am not. It is gardening, as if the world was about to end. In over 200 chapters of the Book of the Barracks and 50 or so longer essays on the website, I've never really had a decent crack at what it means or where it came from. For many reasons, I've been thinking about it a lot this week, and it's time to give it a first pass. Oftentimes when someone is trying to explain something badly, they say maybe it's easier if I start at the beginning. The problem is deciding what to call the beginning. It is the question that journalists, commentators and biographers always want an answer to, and that should be proof enough that it is a lazy question. There is not a thing that has an single exclusive beginning, which led inextricably to that thing. Monocausophilia creates false narratives, false certainties, and false gods. So when we tell our histories, we get to choose where to begin. We look for a positive truth that fits the narrative and decide to call that one Genesis. Let us go back around 20 years when I was semi-professionally debating climate change in London. The first incarnation of my philosophy, which led to happy doomerism, started as a typically over-the-top response to whataboutism. Long, productive debates that frequently ended with, "Yeah, but you drive a car," or "How can you say that when you shop at supermarkets the same as the rest of us?" Logical fallacies, technically ad hominem attacks, but in reality honest frustrations from the public that the public has with itself. Remove those and everyone has a chance of thinking more clearly. The barracks is the manifestation of a defence against it. Put me on a dia in a public panel discussion on climate change, and you can easily find people more knowledgeable, more experienced, more able to quote the literature. But it would be hard to find anyone more thoroughly armoured against the whataboutism that can destroy the perception of an argument. Go down this path of removing the morally dubious actions of good people in society, and all consumption, all of capitalism, all exchanges of time for reward become questionable. Taken to extremes, there is nothing that can be bought with a clear conscience. We have our celebrity villains to lob sideline scorn at from time to time: Monsanto, Amazon, Nestle, ExxonMobil, Facebook, while Bayer, Koch Industries, Chevron and BlackRock annoy the relative anonymity of a public with a short memory, no attention span, and a complicit lack of interest in the cheerleaders of their auto-asphyxiation. Defence against the whataboutist arts took shape at the barracks and became the attempt at a physical existence beyond capitalist morality. Boycott everything you didn't make yourself would make a great t-shirt if the irony wouldn't kill me. It wouldn't. And the idea found a name: radical authenticity. The hope was that anyone spending time here would be able to think clearer, more searching thoughts, while taking a break from the contradictions of a fully lived life outside. Cognitive refuge for moral repair. But the original contradiction remains. Human existence at the end of capitalism, butting up to the punk rock introduction of Anthropocene Part 2, is just too funny for fate not to have thrown them together. What is humour if not the subversion of expectations? I have a list of over 100 existential threats, any one of which has the potential to alter the conditions of our descendants so radically that we get to call it existential. The reality is, though, no matter what trigger you can imagine that shatters society into individual pieces, war, terror, disease, banks or billionaires, climate change makes everything worse. It really is the non plus ultra, the threat ex machina. And it was forever thus. We will always be able to argue pointlessly if the inevitability of our climate doom started in prehistory, at the point where man sowed his dinner instead of gathering it, from when he first domesticated a goose or a pig, dug up and burnt the black sooty rock from an exposed seam in the ground. Or was it when Jeb Bush handed the 2000 US election to cousin George when Al Gore got bored of hanging chads? When you give up the search for how and why we took the path that we did, when you've studied the data and convinced yourself of the truth, when you can see clearly that we have truly sealed our fate, then you get to make a choice. Are you going to take up a position on the shoreline and bark and holler at the incoming tide to reconsider? Are you inclined to fall to your knees, repent your humanity, and beg forgiveness from the thunderstorm? Or are you going to live the best life that you can? It is not an act of defiance any more than it is one of acceptance. Both imply an exterior enemy. Your life has always been subject to exterior influences. You have never been able to control them. This one has a name, and it is undefeatable. But maybe the opportunity to reframe the constant human struggle against hardship as the human desire to conquer, and to deny that and to be at peace with the world would have been the better human interaction with our glorious and beautiful existence. Happy Doomerism is not a contradiction. It is not enforced jollity. Goodness knows I can be a grumpy old man. Neither is it an obsession with downfall. We were always finite. There were always going to be struggles. None of this has ever been an excuse to be miserable, and it's not now. I say, if the end is coming, bake a cake. You can stand at the window watching the weather. I'm going to lay the table, and you're all invited. With love and happiness, your loving Pirate Ben. XO, XO, and another O.